The line outside the Sands Hotel Copa room stretched around the block on the night of August 14th, 1965. Las Vegas was in its golden age, and Dean Martin was its undisputed king. 2 shows a night, 6 nights a week, every seat sold out months in advance. People flew in from New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, anywhere and everywhere, just to spend 2 hours in the same room as the King of Cool. Among the crowd waiting to enter that night was a man named Frank Duca and his 10-year-old son, Michael. Frank was a factory worker from Cleveland, Ohio. He'd saved for 18 months to afford this trip, the flights, the hotel, the show tickets. It was everything the family had. His wife, Maria, had stayed home with their 2 younger children, insisting that Frank take Michael alone. "He needs this," she'd said. "He needs time with his father." What she really meant was, Michael needs something to believe in. Michael Duca was a quiet boy, too quiet. His teacher said he had few friends, spoke rarely in class, and spent most of his time alone, reading or listening to records. His father's records, Dean Martin records. It had started 2 years earlier, when Michael was 8. Frank had come home from a brutal shift at the factory, exhausted and angry, and put on that Amare just to fill the silence. Michael, who had been sitting in the corner pretending to read, looked up with an expression Frank had never seen before. "Who's that singing?" Michael asked. "Dean Martin. He sounds happy." Frank had laughed bitterly. "He's an entertainer, son. It's his job to sound happy." But Michael didn't hear the cynicism. He just heard the voice. Warm, smooth, effortless. A voice that made the world seem less frightening, less lonely. From that day on, Michael became obsessed. He memorized every Dean Martin song. He watched every Dean Martin movie he could find at the local theater. He practiced Dean's casual stance in front of the mirror, his easy smile, his way of making everything look simple. For a shy, lonely boy who felt invisible in his own life, Dean Martin was proof that a different kind of existence was possible. That you could move through the world with grace instead of fear. That you could be loved just by being yourself. Frank didn't understand the obsession, but he recognized its importance. His son had found something to hold on to in a world that often felt cold and confusing. And when Maria suggested the trip to Las Vegas, Frank knew she was right. Michael needed to see his hero in person. The show was everything Michael had dreamed of. Dean Martin walked onto that stage like he owned it, which in a sense he did. He sang, he joked, he made 2,000 strangers feel like they were his personal guests. The effortless cool Michael had studied on television and in movies was even more magnetic in person. Michael sat transfixed, barely blinking, afraid to miss a single moment. When Dean launched into Everybody Loves Somebody, Michael's eyes filled with tears. He didn't know why. He just knew that something inside him was responding to something inside that man on stage. A recognition, a connection that transcended logic. When the show ended, the audience rose for a standing ovation. Dean took his bows with that signature lazy grace, waved to the crowd, and disappeared backstage. The lights came up. People began gathering their things, heading for the exits. But Michael didn't move. "Come on, son," Frank said, touching his shoulder. "Show over." "Can we go backstage?" Michael asked. "Can we meet him?" Frank's heart sank. He'd known this moment was coming. He hoped to avoid it. "Michael, we can't just go backstage. That's not how it works." "But I want to tell him." Michael stopped, struggling to articulate feelings too big for a 10-year-old's vocabulary. "I want to tell him what his music means to me." Frank looked at his son's face, the desperate hope, the raw vulnerability, and made a decision he knew was probably foolish. "Okay," he said, "let's try." They made their way against the flow of the crowd, heading toward the backstage area. A security guard stopped them almost immediately. "Sorry, folks, no access beyond this point." "My son is a huge fan," Frank said. Is there any way we could just? No exceptions. Mr. Martin doesn't do meet and greets after shows. Michael's face crumpled. He didn't cry. He was too old for that or thought he was, but his whole body seemed to deflate. The hope that had been sustaining him evaporated in an instant. Frank put his arm around his son. I'm sorry, buddy, we tried. They turned to leave. And that's when Dean Martin appeared. He was walking down the corridor, still in his tuxedo, bow tie loosened, a cigarette in one hand and a glass of something amber in the other. He was surrounded by assistants and handlers, all talking at once. Dean wasn't paying attention to any of them. His eyes had drifted to the security checkpoint, where a man and a small boy were turning away. The boy's shoulders were slumped. Even from 50 feet away, Dean could see the disappointment radiating off him. Something about that posture, that particular quality of defeated hope, stopped Dean in his tracks. Hold on, he said to his entourage. He walked toward the checkpoint, ignoring the protests of his handlers. The security guard straightened immediately. Mr. Martin, I was just telling these folks. It's fine, Charlie, let them through. Frank and Michael turned around. Dean Martin was standing there looking directly at them, at Michael specifically. You wanted to see me? Dean asked. Michael couldn't speak. His mouth opened but nothing came out. He was standing 3 feet from his hero and his entire body had turned to stone. Dean smiled. He'd seen this before. The paralysis of meeting someone you built up in your imagination. He crouched slightly, bringing himself to Michael's eye level. What's your name, kid? Michael, the boy managed. Michael, good name, strong name. Dean glanced at Frank. This your dad? Michael nodded. You two come a long way to see the show. Cleveland, Frank said, finding his voice. My son, he's your biggest fan, knows all your songs by heart. Dean raised an eyebrow. All of them, that's a lot of songs. He's not exaggerating, Michael said, finally finding his courage. I know every word, even the B-sides. Dean laughed, a warm, genuine laugh different from his stage laugh. The B-sides, kid, even I don't remember the B-sides. The ice was broken. Michael's paralysis melted. He was talking to Dean Martin and Dean Martin was listening, actually listening. Come on, Dean said, straightening up. Let's go somewhere quieter. He led them backstage, past dressing rooms and equipment storage, to a small lounge with leather couches and a bar. His handlers tried to follow, but Dean waved them away. Give me 10 minutes. The kid came all the way from Cleveland. Dean closed the door and gestured for them to sit. So, Michael from Cleveland, Dean said, settling into an armchair. What is it about my music that you like so much? Michael thought carefully. This was the question he'd been preparing for, even if he hadn't known it. It makes me feel like everything going to be okay, he said quietly. Like the world isn't as scary as it seems. Dean's expression shifted. Something flickered behind those famous sleepy eyes. The world is pretty scary, Dean said. Especially when you're young, I remember. You do? Sure, I was a kid once, believe it or not. Grew up in Steubenville, Ohio, not too far from Cleveland. My family didn't have much. I spent a lot of time feeling scared and alone. Michael stared at him. This wasn't the Dean Martin from television. This was someone real. How did you stop being scared? Michael asked. Dean considered the question. I didn't stop being scared, he admitted. I just got better at not letting it show. I learned to put on a face, a mask. The guy you see on stage, that's a character. The real me is still that scared kid sometimes. So the confidence isn't real? Michael asked. The confidence is real, Dean said. It just took a long time to build, and some days it's stronger than others. He leaned forward. Can I tell you a secret? Michael nodded. The people who look like they've got it all figured out, the ones who seem fearless, they're the biggest fakers of all. Everyone is scared. Everyone. The difference is, some people let fear stop them, and some people feel the fear and do it anyway. Which one are you? Michael asked. Dean smiled. Depends on the day, but most of the time I try to do it anyway. Michael was quiet, processing this. Dean Martin wasn't fearless. He was just brave enough to keep going. I'm scared all the time, Michael admitted. At school, I don't talk to anyone, I don't have friends. I just listen to your music and pretend I'm somewhere else. Dean nodded slowly. I get it. Music was my escape too. When things got hard, I disappeared into songs. It was the only place I felt safe. Does it ever get better? Michael asked. Dean was quiet for a long moment. It gets different, he said. You grow up. You find people who get you. It takes time, it takes courage, but yeah, it gets better. He paused. But the loneliness never goes away completely. That's just part of being alive. Michael absorbed this. It wasn't comforting, but it was true. So what do you do? Michael asked. When it gets heavy. Dean smiled. I sing, I connect. I remember that everyone else is lonely too, and that makes me feel less alone. He leaned back. And I try to make that scared kid I used to be proud. Dean glanced at his watch. I've got to go soon, but before you leave, I want to give you something. He returned with a small black guitar pick. This is from my first guitar, Dean said, pressing it into Michael's palm. I've had it 30 years. I want you to keep it, and when you're scared, remember what I told you. Everyone is afraid. The brave ones just do it anyway. I can't take this, Michael whispered. It's yours now, Dean said. Someday you'll pass it on. Michael cried openly. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for coming, Dean said. You reminded me why this matters. They walked back into the neon night of Las Vegas. Michael clutched the guitar pick, feeling like his life had changed. 40 years passed. Michael Duca grew up. He became a teacher. He spent 35 years working with scared, quiet kids who felt invisible. He never forgot that night. The guitar pick stayed in his desk drawer for decades. In 2005, Michael wrote a letter to the Martin family, thanking them for a kindness that changed his life. They wrote back. They told him to keep the guitar pick, to pass it on. A few months later, Michael met a quiet 12-year-old named Thomas. He told him the story. Then he pressed the pick into the boy's hand. Everyone is afraid, Michael said softly. The brave ones just do it anyway. That's how kindness works. It moves from hand to hand, heart to heart. Dean Martin never knew how many lives he touched that night. But one 15-minute conversation became a lifetime of courage. That's the real legacy of the King of Cool.